Hello everyone, so welcome. Um, Today I'll be talking about resource quota and some of the stuff that I learned today and some of the issue that I resolved. One of the issue that I resolved is was how to extract metric from CoreDNS and also from Calico. So I'm actually working on um working with Prometheus and Grafana. So I'm trying to extract all possible metric from all application running my within my Kubernetes cluster. So I had to work with that to extract the metric from core DNS in Calico. Now right now I have the core DNS metrics being graphed in Grafana. So that's something I one of the issues I resolved today. Now let's talk about like resource quota. That's something I learned today. Resource quota, it's something that it's a way for you to actually control resource usage within your Kubernetes cluster. Although right now at the moment resource quota is limited to a namespace, so you can only control resource usage within a namespace. But if you I hope in the future you'll be able to control resource usage across namespace. Now what are the examples of resources that you can control? The usual ones like CPU, like the memory, the number of objects, of specific objects that can be created. For example, number of deployment, number of ports, number of secrets, those kind of things. You can control that using resource quota. Right. I mean, I'm very sure some of us have seen, different use cases that you can actually apply resource quota. For example, in most cases, here, if you have a shared cluster, okay, if you have a shared cluster, you want to make sure that um, certain user is that is restricted to a namespace. For example, restricted to like the dev namespace or something, can only use this certain amount of resources. Also, if you have a case whereby you have a very very limited resource, for example, you have a special kind of disk or a special kind of like processor, and you have certain node with a special processor, for example a GPU node, and you want those resources to be limited for a particular user in a particular namespace. Now what you can do is you can use resource quota to limit that. So it's a way to control resource usage in your Kubernetes cluster. Now some of the interesting things that you will see is resource quota actually works in hand with limit ranger. What do I mean by that? So if you enable resource quota for CPU, that means you specify that the person in this namespace, you can't use more than 2 gigabytes of what memory, 2 CPU units. That means everybody that wants to create objects in that particular namespace has to have their CPU or their memory specified. Okay, look at, let's say this is your resource quota. Okay, all right. So if you specify like your resource quota and you want that the CPU has been specified, the number of amount of memory has been specified. All right. So anybody that's trying to create pod in the same namespace as this guy, as this resource quota, must have their CPU specified and all their memory specified, if memory is also part of the resource quota. Now, what about we know that this is not the case in production. You sometimes launch ports that you don't even specify their resource requirements. How do you make sure those ports are not rejected because they're in violation of resource quota requirement? This is where limit range comes in. So I'm going to leave it to you guys to actually look into limit range. So limit range is a way to specify default CPU and default memory. So if you specify resource quota that memory is required, if you specify resource quota for memory, that means you limited memory for a particular namespace, and somebody is trying to launch a pod but did not specify their memory, you can use the limit range to give them a default memory. excuse me. Now that's just what limit range does. So that was something I picked up, wrote a couple of notes, interesting note about. And okay, okay, some other interesting things for those who want to go through this documentation is going to be, how you control, how can you make sure that so how can you make sure that if somebody is if somebody is trying to launch resources into this particular namespace, right? Like, excuse me, that they must have a particular priority class, right? Right? So I mean, those kind of details are like, advanced level of resource quota. I haven't seen a use case or implementation, as far as I know, based on my search, because I was actually looking for cases whereby people are using this in their Kubernetes cluster, but I haven't seen cases like that. All right. So you want to make sure that, port with certain priority can only be allowed into a namespace with a particular resource quota. I mean, I can't really think of a reason why you want to do that. I can't, but it's something that some people do. All right. So all right. So one other thing I also talked about is I think quality, if I remember correctly, the quota quality. All right. I think I forgot the word. All right, the word is quality. Da, 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 da. All right. All right. So it basically, remember, right? So you are trying to specify. You can also use specify resource quota to only apply to ports in a particular state. For example, you want resource quota that for ports in a running state, on a terminating state, right? Those are some of the extra condition that resource quota gives you ability to. So you can actually specify resource quota that I only want about 10 running ports, right? They can be 1000 terminated port, but only 10 of them can be running. That's the resource quota. All right. So that's all called a scope selector. As you can see from here, that's all called a scope selector. Yep. That's all called scope selector. So you are specifying a scope, right? Right. You are specifying a scope that your resource quota applies to. So those are like, this is what I looked into resource quota. I'm probably going to write a very short, real production scenario situation that you can actually resolve with resource quota. Let's move on something else I looked into today, which is I'm looking at GCP recently, and I learned about GCP Cloud Share, which I find very interesting. So it allows you to interact with GCP on the browser. Something it's now available in AWS. And one thing I noticed is based on my understanding, it only allows about 5 gig of storage, and it logs you out if you are inactive for like an hour or so. And also, if you're inactive for a while, like 30 days, it will send you an email about possibility of wiping out your current shell, because this is like an instance that is being presented to you for you to use as your CLI in the browser, right? So, but if you shut this down, you come back, everything that you've created is still going to be in there, right? And one of the other things that that was mentioned is that this can be used for code editing. This can be used for preview of deployment. I'm still trying to like understand what they mean by that. So this is something I'm going to be looking into and discussing further. So those are like the two main things that I looked into today, apart from those issues that I resolved regarding CoreDNS and Calico. All right, so that's it for today, and I will see you guys tomorrow.